Hello everybody and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 296. My name is NBZ and I didn't meet any celebrities today, I was just doing a normal stuff, normal day, but Bally met some real celebrities out there. So who was it that you met, Bally?
Yeah, we were at just like this it's called National Trust in the UK for Brits. They'll probably have heard of that. It's a National Trust property very near where we live, and was there with Bally Chew, Bally Jr. and Caroline, and who do I see? Mario and Luigi.
They were just there, hanging out.
They
were doing some Switch 2 promo, apparently, just getting the hype levels up. We're close now, so they got to do a bit of PR, local PR, in Scotland.
And in this property, they're very good at like kids stuff, and like there's a very impressive play park, which was the main reason we were there. And I just see them, and when Caroline asked Bally Jr. initially, "Do you want to get a picture with Mario and Luigi?" And Bally Jr. was just like, no. He's very scared, very shy. But then he saw lots of other kids getting their picture with them. And then Caroline was like, "You need to do this for the content, Bally." And I was like, well, Bally Jr. doesn't want to. But then Caroline went to the loo, and while she was at the loo, Bally Jr. was like, "I do want to." He basically was like, "I do want to do it. I want to." And I was like, "Okay, we can go do it." So we went and did it. We got a picture with Mario and Luigi. And it's that funny thing where Bally Jr. originally called them Mario Kart. And then I was like, well, to be fair to him, that's his only reference for Mario is Mario Kart. But then I heard other kids say, "Look, Mario Kart." And I was, what? Are you kidding me? Like, all these kids' reference for Mario and Luigi is Mario Kart, which is very funny.
Well, that's the thing, right? If you assume that, like, because Mario Kart is the number one game that people buy for Switch, every time a parent buys a kid a Switch, it comes with Mario Kart ostensibly, not with Odyssey, not with Wonder, not with any of these Mario-focused games, but with this specific spin-off, this thing that has become bigger than the brand itself. And so, yeah, it stands to reason that not only would Bally Jr. say Mario Kart because it's their only point of reference, but for most other kids, they're probably also their only point of reference. Although that said, the Mario movie does exist, so that does call things into question a little bit, because you would think that would have a bit of breakthrough.
I think a lot of these kids were too young to sit on their bums for a couple of hours for a film, to be fair. Okay. So I think most of them either haven't seen the Mario film in its entirety, or have just like seen snippets to the point where it's forgettable for them potentially. So I don't know, but certainly Bally Jr. We've watched a couple of films at home, and that's been fine, but we still haven't tried, taking him to a cinema. I mean, that's very hard now with Bally Chew to like bring a 6-month-old baby along with a 3-year-old to a cinema.
But I mean, does he like watch films at home? Is there any that he sat through all the way?
He has sat through the first 2 Toy Story films all the way and appreciated them and enjoyed them.
It's pretty good.
But we need to try some more. For sure, and
gotta get him on the Mario movie, Bal. This is very important, cultural touchstone.
It's a PG, so like there's and the thing is, there's even scary stuff in use for him. Like, there's a lot of films that are used that still have like some darker themes and things that are like, To
be fair, Bowser is presented in some scary ways in that movie, I would say. So there's definitely some. There's also the Luigi's Mansion stuff at the beginning.
Luigi's Mansion thing. There's like some proper like little jump scares for sure. Especially when you're his age. So he's also a very gentle soul. He is so sensitive, genuinely. Like, he is so sensitive to these things. He's getting less sensitive for sure as he's getting older, but like he's like terrified of like bugs and things, and he thinks everything is like a wasp that's trying to kill him. So
of course,
we're getting there. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's nice to hear.
Well, I'm glad that he's learning who Mario and Luigi are. It's doing a little bit of education here.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, we would sit down for another Mario Kart session at some point, but the weather in the UK, in particular Edinburgh, has just been. We've not had rain in like 3 weeks. Like, the grass is going slightly brown. Like, there's just been so sunny, blue skies almost every day. It's been mad. So it's not been good weather to sit inside with your toddlers. Yeah,
just for context, for people who don't live in Scotland, no rain in 3 weeks in Edinburgh is basically the equivalent of like a Jesus Christ miracle.
Yes,
like that just doesn't happen.
We had a fairly dry last spring, but then that was married up with probably the wettest like July, August I can remember. So I think we're definitely in for a very rainy summer. But according to like climate change experts, that's a very standard thing for the UK to happen, is
Yeah.
milder, drier springs, heavier, rainy, stormy summers. So that's gonna stay apparently, which is lots of fun.
Yeah, well, I hopefully I'll be heading to Scotland for probably about a month or so.
Excellent.
In July, end of June, July, which means hopefully I'll dodge most of the hottest weather of the summer that will happen in London. And last year I was in Scotland around that time as well, and I remember I was playing mini shoot adventures on my Steam Deck, like in my childhood bedroom with like the window open and the sun kind of like cracking through, and it was like a really nice temperate like heat, but like not crazy, and that was very, very nice. So I'm hoping that will be the same this year, but we shall see. Yeah, we're here. Hello, welcome. It's time for us to talk
Co-owners.
Sorry, yes, that is very true. Yes, that's us of this podcast, and we're here to talk about video games and Nintendo, which is great. Yeah, we have some things on the show today that Bally will tell you right now.
First segment, we're going to talk about the games that we've been playing, and second segment, we're going to cover a couple of listener emails.
Yes, and we should also say that the next episode will not be Switch 2 because it won't quite be that time yet.
Right.
And then we'll have an episode after that it'll come a little bit later. It won't be like weekend or week of the Switch 2, but it'll come a little bit later. I was toying with the idea of doing like a what do you call it, like a diary, like a Switch 2 diary of that weekend, of like playing it and just like solo kind of putting my thoughts into that. And so I might do something like that, in case you want some Switch 2 thoughts out there. But yeah, we'll do a proper review of everything in Mario Kart and all that stuff, and welcome tour I'm sure that we'll get into on the episode following that launch. So yes, that will be.
There will be
very good.
a non-Tendo episode in between those two episodes where we're going to cover Summer Games Fest. So that's the plan.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully there'll be some good announcements and we can talk about them and give our thoughts. So yeah, that's the plan. And probably next episode will be slightly delayed as well because we've got some travel stuff intervening. But yeah, should all be good, and we'll update you as well as we get closer. But let's get into the video games, what we have been playing. Bally, a long time ago, we both bought the video game Kirby Triple Deluxe on the Nintendo 3DS. And our idea was, well, we could one day...
Did I buy it as well?
I'm pretty sure you did. I think you own this, or you own or Robobot, maybe? Or do you not own either of them?
I don't actually know. I really don't know.
Great.
If I own one, it's definitely Triple Deluxe, but yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you do, but maybe you don't. Anyway, I think like at one point in time, we were like, oh, we should do a backlog club at some point that involves Kirby, and Triple Deluxe was like on the menu as a thing that we could potentially do, I seem to recall. Or at least I've been holding... There've been certain games that I've been holding in my...
Then you betrayed me and just played it anyway.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, I've been holding them in my back pocket for like 6 years or whatever. And, you know, like, Backlog Club is a hard thing to do in any case, but now it's just even harder. And so I'm like, well, you know, it's never really going to happen, is it? So I might as well just pop this cork and just do it myself instead. So I'll probably be doing that with a few games. Like Sin and Punishment is another one that was like, oh, maybe we could do that at some point. I just don't think it's going to happen. So basically what I wanted was, I feel like I get in this rut sometimes where I'm like, I have like 700 things I could play because it's just like, there's so much access to everything. My PC has everything. I can play everything on anything. And I tend to just forget that I have the 3DS and I have these older systems I can go back to. And I bought a bunch of things before that eShop closed down, right? And I was like, well, I want to play these, so I'm going to buy all these things. And then I, proceed to not play any of them, and they just sit there and, gather dust, which is not the idea. The idea is to buy them so that I can play them and talk about them on the show. And I think it's been a while since I've played like a Nintendo kind of focused thing from first party that we have not touched. And obviously Triple Deluxe is not like a super old game. It's not like when we went back and played, Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy or the Paper Mario, things like that. But it's still old in terms of relative history.
What year was it, sorry?
I'm just trying to check now, but I want to say that it came out like around a couple of years into 3DS's lifespan. Okay, 2014.
Yeah,
January of 2014. So it is over a decade old.
11 years.
Yeah, it's really, you could, look, I would call that at this point, I don't know what your cutoff for retro is, Bally, but I feel like a lot of people say that retro is like maybe a 15-year window, and I think that probably makes some sense. Like, at this point, the Wii is probably within a retro phase of its existence.
I think 2 generations is retro, I'd say. I don't know, yeah. Wii, 3DS.
Yeah, probably.
Wii U.
I think so. I think 3DS still feels like a little too new to be retro, but it's 11 years old, this video game, which, it's definitely not a spring chicken. But yeah, so I basically, I wanted to play something relatively breezy, something that I could listen to podcasts while playing as well. I picked up 3DS and I looked at Kirby Triple Deluxe, and it stared back at me and it said, yes, today is the day. And so that's what I did. I took it off the shelf, put it into my 3DS. My 3DS, by the way, didn't really need charging. I hadn't booted it up for, I don't know, like 6 months or something. And I still got like a good 2 hours of play out of it before I needed to charge it again. So I think that speaks to the level of battery life that we used to have in our consoles, which is certainly not the case anymore. I do have to say, the worst thing about the Steam Deck is it doesn't retain charge in any way. Like, you have to... Every time I play my Steam Deck, I put it into sleep mode and then I put it in my case and then I don't play it for a week and I come back and it's dead because it's completely run out of battery in that week. The Switch is a lot better than that. Your Switch you can kind of leave and it does retain it pretty well.
See, I have a charging cupboard. I think I showed you this when you were around, but basically,
yes,
I need somewhere that kids can't access that also charges. So there's a cupboard under our TV that I've got like a USB-C that comes through a hole in the back, and then it's a cupboard door that you can shut, and I basically rotate between the Steam Deck and whatever console I'm playing at that moment. So at the moment I'm playing a lot of Xbox with Claire Obscure, and I'll just like rotate that charger between the Steam Deck and the Xbox gamepad, and the door is shut so that Bally Junior, Bally 2 can't interfere, and I can game in peace.
But when you are done with your Steam Deck, do you just turn it off? Do you shut it down, or do you put it into sleep mode and then plug it into that charger?
I sleep mode it and plug it into that charger, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my only concern with that is like overcharging stuff, but I guess there is a dock for the Steam Deck that would do the same thing essentially. So, and
you might impact the incredibly good battery life of the Steam Deck. Like I feel like the downside is the battery gets worse, and the battery's already so bad that it just doesn't feel like a big issue, personally. But
yeah, I will say the Steam Deck OLED is a lot better than that. It does depend on what game you're playing. Like when I was playing Trails in the Sky, the Steam Deck could run for 7 hours on Trails in the Sky, which is kind of insane. But if you're playing like an older game or a game that requires less power draw, then you can certainly get a lot of hours out of it. Actually, a little bit more than the Switch itself. So anyway, we'll run into many more battery conversations, I'm sure, when Switch 2 arrives, because that's likely...
I think Nintendo said they're doing something with the Switch 2 where it's going to have there's a smart charging feature.
Was the 90% battery thing? Yes. Yeah. So it doesn't go to full, essentially. It just goes to 90% and kind of keeps it there, which
iPhones have had for at least 5 years now or something. But yeah, it's...
Yeah. You have like contextual charging, which is where you can set that thing, and then before bed, if you plug in your phone, it will slowly charge it overnight. So it basically is 100% by the time you wake up. Which can be quite convenient and handy. Sometimes it doesn't work, and that's why I turned it off, because I did have it on automatically on mine, but then there was one time where I needed it to charge quickly, and it decided to charge slowly, and I was like, I can't, this is fucking annoying. So anyway, I'm sure the technology has gotten a lot better at this point, and Nintendo will have implemented the most modern of conveniences. But anyway, we've been talking for 15 minutes. I haven't told you anything about Kirby Triple Deluxe yet. So Kirby Triple Deluxe, a video game that came out in 2014, a 3DS Kirby game. Now, Bally, setting some context, my feelings on Kirby, your feelings on Kirby, I would say are relatively similar in that he's cool, he's fun, he's quirky. Does he have a 10 out of 10 masterpiece video game? I would argue no.
People need to calm down about Forgotten Land. That's my attitude. And Canvas Curse is the best Kirby game.
Correct, of course. So we have good, strong opinions about Kirby. No, I think Kirby is one of those franchises that, like, he's almost more popular for his character design than he is for his games. Like, I feel like more Kirby revenue comes in from merch of Kirby plushies than does the video game sales, which is all well and good because Kirby's very cute and everybody loves him and he's adorable.
He definitely had a big Smash Brothers boost, like in terms of recognizability and that kind of thing. People know who Kirby is.
And that's Sakurai, like, giving him, props and, making him the most powerful being in the universe, of course. Everyone knows that, but...
I think more people can name Kirby than name any Kirby game, right? Like, he's just
correct. I think so. Yeah, pretty much. If we had a future, where Kirby comes into Mario Kart and Mario Kart becomes Smashified, then there's a future where Bally Jr. sees Kirby and says Mario Kart when pointing at Kirby. But we'll
very likely to happen one day. I think, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kirby, a series that I think is good, has some good video games in it that I like, but has this thing I find, and I found this with Forgotten Land, and I will say Triple Deluxe falls into it as well, where starts out quite strong, starts out like lots of ideas, lots of cool things going on, and by the back half of it, by the end, it starts to kind of just repeat itself and do things that you've seen before and be like, okay, you're just going to refight all these bosses again, or okay, you're going to go through the same thing and this mini boss you've already done. Like, there's definitely a heavy amount of repetition and running out of road, I would say. I would say most Kirby games I've played would be stronger if they ended 3 hours earlier than they did, or 2 hours earlier than they did, because it does feel like the back half of Kirby games, generally speaking, from the ones I've played, they tend to kind of wear themselves out a little bit, which is a little bit of a shame because I do really like Kirby Triple Deluxe. I think it is one of the better Kirby games I've played. I think it does a lot of cool things. So I would say, generally speaking, Kirby is a franchise where Nintendo takes some risks and usually does some weird, funky ideas. There's obviously more regular Kirby games, and obviously the original ones were that. Back then, it wasn't regular because it was like this whole new idea of like you suck things up and you get powers, right? So that was the gimmick. But I would say there's only been a handful of Kirby games in the last decade which are straightforward Kirby platformers. There was Return to Dreamland on Wii. There was the one that launched on Switch that I'm not remembering the name of now, but was the 2D Kirby game that came out when Switch was kind of new. And I would say Triple Deluxe kind of falls into that as well, insofar as from a gameplay standpoint, it is traditional Kirby in that you are sucking up enemies, you're getting their powers, you are using those powers and fighting bosses and mini-bosses and all that sort of stuff. It has taken me, Bally, despite the fact that, the 3DS was the 3DS and it was all about 3D and all this sort of stuff, it has taken me this entire time up until I was playing this game to look at the name Triple Deluxe and be like, oh, like 3D, like triple D.
Yeah, I've only just realized that as well. Yeah,
right. Like, how did my brain not come to that conclusion sooner? That's kind of baffling. But yes, while in the middle of playing this game, I was like, oh, Triple Deluxe. That's what they meant by it. Which is, just harkening back to the DS days where everything was called like Dual Strike or like Dawn of Sorrow. Right. The DS was a popular thing to do to name your DS games, but 3DS, that never really happened, and so I wasn't really thinking about it. But that, I would say, that is the core gimmick of this game, is the 3D, and that is one of the nicest things about it, is that I do feel like in the latter day of 3DS, a lot of companies, even Nintendo, tended to kind of like do less of 3D stuff, and it wasn't a focus. They had the 2DS out there. It was something that kind of fell into the background. At this point in time, 2014, we're talking prime 3DS. We're talking all these games coming out using that 3D for gameplay, doing interesting things with it. And I think Kirby Triple Deluxe is one of the best examples of that on the system. So it very much does the two planes of action thing, by which I mean there's a front plane and there's a back plane, and oftentimes Kirby will, jump on these little stars, and the star will transport him into the background or transport him into the foreground, and you will play levels where you can see the depth, and so you can see all the way across there, all the way into the front. There's certain items that play with this, so there's certain levels you'll get this long bar that you hold. It's almost like a I don't know, if you took the weights off of like a lifting bar at a gym, it would be like just a really long one of those, and it basically goes the length of the screen into the background, and so you are jumping with this thing and you are looking either foreground or background to see it like interact with objects and to destroy blocks and to do certain things like that. So it's very cool in that way. there's a lot of boss fights that use it as well, like your classic Wispy Woods fight, right? The tree. So the tree in this one, he jumps into the background, and then he like spawns these vines that like come forward into the screen, and they have this kind of like bend forward and like poke into the screen. And the depth stuff on it is just really good. Every time I go back to the 3DS, I'm just always blown away by how crisp and how sharp games look when you have 3D on. And like, there's definitely a dullness to games when you don't have that effect applied. And one of the things this game does, which is quite smart, is oftentimes on 3DS, you would have gyro controls implemented, and you'd be like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is stupid, because when I do gyro, I'm going to lose the 3D effect, and it like ruins it, and then I can't really see the screen properly. Kirby does this really smart thing where when it wants you to use gyro, because there are certain parts where you jump in this boat and you like tilt the 3DS to like move the boat along a rail, and every time that you interact with one of those elements that requires you to use gyro, it turns the 3D off. Like, it automatically puts it into 2D again.
Because this is before the new 3DS that introduced the face tracking to help avoid this issue.
Yeah, exactly. But what it does is it just, on a software level, it turns 3D to 0. So even if you have it maxed out, which I did for the most of the game, it will eliminate it. And so you'll be able to actually tilt the 3DS and see what you're doing, which is really, really nice. But what I did notice when I did that was the game looked a lot flatter, obviously. Of course it's flat because it's not 3D. But like, in terms of the art style, in terms of the color and the poppingness of it, it really lost a lot, I would say. And so, yeah, I do just want to reiterate, playing a game like this in 3D, just beautiful. It looks really, really good. And just, it holds up so well. Like, it honestly, like, at this point, you know, in terms of graphical fidelity, I feel like 2014 3DS games still kind of like up there in terms of how good they look versus other games around. And yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. I think it's really well done. So there is a kind of gimmick to this game in that it's not like an obvious thing, and it's not really like that game changing. But basically, you get this ability called Hypernova when you go through levels sometimes, and it's a level-based thing, so it's not like you can find it somewhere and take it to the next level. It basically designs the level around it, where Kirby basically eats this fruit, this like weird-looking fruit, and he does this cutscene where he suddenly like starts shimmering, and he goes like, I don't know, polychrome essentially, and then you get back onto the map, onto the level, and your suction is like amplified by like 10 times. So he's doing like mega gusts. So what happens is you get this and you come across like 15 enemies and you're like, whoa, and you just swallow them all up in one fell swoop. And some of the animations on these are incredible, where, you know, he's gonna just eat an entire tree, and so he's just like sucking, and like all the leaves come off the tree, and like he roots the tree out the ground, and the entire thick trunk of the tree just goes into his mouth, and he just like eats it all. My favorite animation of this was later in the game. There's this giant snake enemy. They're kind of like poking their heads out of these pipes, kind of Mario style, and you suck those snakes and you basically pull their tongue, and eventually you start sucking the entire snake into you, and the snake is so long that it's just like, it takes like 3 or 4 seconds for Kirby to eat this snake, and the animation of this enormous snake just going into Kirby's mouth is so funny, and it's really well done just from an animation standpoint. So those sections, generally speaking, they are quite easy. They're kind of more built for spectacle of like, just go through here, have fun, suck up every single thing that's on the screen, and just demolish it. But there's a real satisfaction to like eating a snake, which is a weird thing to say, but I think it's really well done. Like, his mouth opened like so wide, it's like, Jesus, there's no wonder that Sakurai thinks he's the most powerful being in the universe, because he can basically just like eliminate anything by just eating it, which is pretty wild. But yeah, I think overall, I really enjoyed my time with it. I would say it's relatively formulaic in terms of its structure. So there are 6 worlds, and each world has 6 stages, but every world also has a bonus stage, and you get the bonus stage by collecting all the collectibles within the level, right?
Very Nintendo.
So, very classic Nintendo stuff.
Does it overstay its welcome? You don't see the ideas repeated too much later?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, is it does a little bit at the end, because the end is a lot of like, the final world essentially is levels where you're just refighting bosses, and they aren't that enjoyable because you're fighting every single thing you've already fought in the game a second time.
Yeah.
And there's not much like all the loops and animations are the same, so it doesn't switch things up. So I do think it falls off in that back half. The like last couple of worlds is a little bit more of a slog, and especially so because it's one of those games where you don't get the collectible unless you finish the entire level. So if you miss one collectible, it's like, oh, for God's sake.
Did you go for 100%?
I actually did, which I usually wouldn't with 2D platformers like this, but it did feel like in a similar vein to 3D Land, 3D World, where they kind of build the levels around the collectibles in the sense that, sure, you could run through and ignore them, but that would make the level design far less interesting, and it would make the challenge of it far less interesting, and the puzzles, like, not very good, because you could just, like, Kirby your way through it and just like, oh, I'm just going to run and just go to the next thing. But then you miss out on that stuff, right? And I think because I wanted a bit more from it, I felt like I should do that. And I don't know if I regretted it by the end. I didn't think I would have had to do all of it because some of the extra levels you unlock at the end are not as interesting as the ones previously. But for me, it was easier to get everything in a single run of a level than it ever is in a Donkey Kong platformer. I think the thing is with a Donkey Kong platformer, and why I never end up doing it with those, is I know it's very difficult already from the beginning to get every single Kong letter or to get every single...
Just getting from A to B in those games can be very challenging beyond the idea of even collecting anything, right? It's just...
And I think the important point about Donkey Kong is it is very engaging to just engage with the level on its pure... run through, whereas with Kirby I would say it's far less engaging if you're just playing through without getting collectibles. Like collectibles and DK are a little cherry on top, whereas in I think 3D Land, 3D World and Kirby games, this one especially, the collectible feels much more important and something that actually engages you more with the game as opposed to those other ones. So yeah, and usually there's between 3 and 4 of these little, they're kind of like, I don't know what you call them, like mini badge star things. They're like shinies essentially. So the little shiny things. And so yeah, the first world I got all of them. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm going to try and get all of these for the rest of the game. There was only a couple of times where I had to replay a level to get one that I'd missed, but for the most part I was able to, if you scour the environment enough and you're like trying to hover everywhere and just look around, you'll eventually find everything. I also somehow managed to find myself in a super secret area where I flew up to the top of the map in this area, and like some reason I was pressing up on my circle pad, and I like entered a secret door that wasn't there, like that was in the moon, and suddenly I was like in this secret area which gave me like a bunch of 1-ups and a bunch of other stuff, and I was like, oh wow, somehow I stumbled into this thing that I definitely would have had to look up online otherwise. So
and did you do all the secret levels you unlocked?
I did, yes. And so
how
each
long
of the
to beat
secret
claims
levels,
that completionist is 24.5 hours?
Yeah, so when it says completionist, I think it's talking about some of the other stuff in the game, because
fair enough.
You know how it has like the DDD mini game, and then also when you beat the game, you can basically play through the whole game as DDD and stuff like that.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
So I think that's what that's referring to, because I did 100% all of those things. So I got 100 of the little superstar things, and then I go back to the main menu, and my percentage is like 68%, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess it doesn't count that as doing 100%, even though in my head I would anyway, because that's like the main thing of the game. But yeah, there's like challenge stuff. There's like a Colosseum arena thing, and like there's 2 like mini game things as well. So I think
Sakurai cannot resist a mini game with Kirby. My
God.
He
can't. Yeah, and his menu design is all over this. Even though I'm not sure if he was involved in this at all, because he would have been doing Smash Brothers at this point in time. So I think this is just HAL doing it themselves. But his menu design is all over the shop. And you know, obviously at the end of each level you have the classic, oh, you got to time the button in order to get the thing, and it's actually really difficult, this one, to get it perfect. So oftentimes I would fuck it up, and it's like a golf bar, right? It's like the golf like wind up bar of like, oh, hit it at the peak, and oftentimes I would mess it up and just go to the first spot and not get as many things. You get the other collectible in this game is like these keychains essentially, and they're cool because they have the 3D thing where when you look at them in 3D, you can zoom in and rotate them and look at them, and they're basically based off like old Kirby stuff. There's actually a lot of like old Kirby love in this game. There are moments that reminded me of stuff from like Mario Odyssey, where obviously the big thing in Mario Odyssey is the New Donk City like celebration and like, oh, it's like Donkey Kong and it's all cool and you're doing it in 2D. There are segments of this game that are like, oh shit, we're like showing like Game Boy Kirby stuff, and there's these little I don't know, curtains that you unfurl sometimes, and there was one right at the end of the game that showed like the progression of Kirby from like black and white pixel art Kirby to like then colored Kirby
God,
to then
I love a bit of that. I love it.
Yeah. So a bit of fan service there of like, oh, here's the history of what Kirby looked like over the generations, like inside one of the levels. And when you went through the door at the end, the door was shaped. It was surrounded by classic Game Boy Kirby, like you were going through a door through Game Boy. So really cool stuff there as well in terms of like celebrating the game and the franchise and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't know if I would recommend doing the 100% thing, but I do think it makes the most of the levels, generally speaking. And if you were to do it, I'd probably do it up until like the third world, and then probably just not worry about it after that, because it's fun to do up until that point, and then it gets a little bit more sloggy. But yeah, it was just a very easy to pick up and play game, and that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted like a platformer that I didn't have to pay too much attention to, because there's no story in Kirby, of course, and I mean there is, but you know, who really gives a shit? And it was very, very enjoyable to run through and just to see all the fun ideas they had, and yeah, lots of great use of 3D throughout it, and I enjoyed it greatly. So I do think that obviously you can't buy it anymore on digital because Nintendo took all that stuff down, but I feel like Triple Deluxe was popular enough that you can find it out there in terms of secondhand pretty easily. I think I got mine new, but I think I got it quite cheap because it was a Nintendo Selects version, because they were doing Nintendo Select stuff back on 3DS, so it was down to like 15 quid, I want to say, so I picked it up.
Right.
And I also did pick up Robobot as well new, but I got that right before the 3DS shut down, and so I think that was a good deal I found on Amazon somewhere. But
nice.
Yep, I've got Robobot now, which I understand is a bit more well liked than Triple Deluxe. I think that people like both of them.
Is that game rumored to come to Switch as well?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Robobot to me feels like more in the vein of an Epic Yarn or a Canvas Curse or a Mass Attack, in that it's like a unique Kirby mechanic being applied that isn't like it's not
right.
just your mama's Kirby, right? Like Triple Deluxe is.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the one Kirby game that I played that was probably the most vanilla and uninspiring was Crystal Shards on the 64. I think I played that on Wii U, and I
would say that falls into this category a little bit. It's a little bit more interesting because of the combining of powers, right? Like that was the unique thing about that one.
On Crystal Shards, that's the unique selling point, is you can combine powers, and that's semi-interesting for 10 minutes, I guess. But yeah, it was just fairly rudimentary levels, and it was fine. It was a fine game. It's a good game. It's just nothing inspiring. But yeah,
I do think that to that point that I made earlier, I think when I was at the end of World 2 of this game, I was like, this might be the best Kirby game. Like it was doing loads of ideas and like really unique, fun areas and everything.
We felt that about Forgotten Land as well at the end of World 2.
Yeah,
like we were like,
and I think that's the ultimate curse of Kirby for me, is that if Kirby games kind of like cut off like half of themselves, then maybe half or a third, then I think they would be much stronger than they are. Like even today, this morning when I beat it, I was like, oh wow, okay, there's even more level. Like so the final world has 2 extra levels, so when you unlock all the the collectibles, you unlock a second extra level, and I was like, oh wow, there's even more for me to do right before I do the final boss. And then the final boss was like 2 phases of DDD, then 2 phases of this big boss, and then a giant, huge version of this big boss. And there's a way in which the ending of Kirby games becomes like way too epic for the series. Yes. Like what you would think is like, it's always
space related. It's always like it's frustrating. But yeah,
it's like I don't think it's frustrating personally. I think it's it's just weird that this series that's like this cute little guy is like the final boss is always like this world-ending like annihilation thing that is destructive, and
the first boss is always a tree and the final boss is always world-ending.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just like crazy stuff popping off. But yes, I do think the whole there was a bit of JRPG energy to the end of Kirby Triple Deluxe, by which I mean here's 7 boss fights in a row, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of ready to be done now. But
just talking about that whole like, oh, here's more remixes of the same levels. and how we already thought a game like Forgotten Land already kind of did that. That's exactly what they feels like they're doing a bit with the Switch 2 edition. Is here's remixed versions of the existing levels, and then they add like you go to the same entrance to a level, and it gives you two options to pick on the menu, like which one you want. And it's like just do levels, just do a separate game or something. Like it doesn't. Right. I don't know. Just it's labeled so annoyingly. Like I just want it to be something different. But yeah.
Yeah, that's just it's tricky, isn't it? I do think having played this now, I'm a little bit Kirby'd out, so I doubt I will go and do that extra. Yeah. I don't think I was going to do that anyway for Forgotten Land. For
one Kirby game every 3 years is a lot of Kirby.
Yeah, look, I've got Robobot sitting on my shelf. I'll wait for a rainy day in a few years' time, and then I'll pick that up, and I'll come on this show and I'll say the exact same things I did today, which is, wow, the 3DS 3D is really good, guys. Do you remember that? It's great. Feel like I'm a bit of a broken record every time
it's not going to break into the top 50 of all time in a few episodes time.
Triple Deluxe? Yeah. No, I don't think so. No, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really great game, and if you want something as a kind of a background game as you're absorbing other media, I think it's a good second screen experience for sure. So yeah, Kirby Triple Deluxe worth playing.
This always feels like such a low, not a low blow, but just like a gut punches. It's a good second screen experience. It's just I don't mean that in that way. Like for me, I treasure games that I can listen to podcasts while playing. Honestly, like I do think that's a good part of my diet, and that is exactly why I wanted to play this, because I was behind on podcasts, and I'm like, I want to play something, but I also want to do something else at the same time. How do I do that? I play a Kirby platformer because I don't have to pay attention to the story of that. And, the music's good and all, but, like, it's Kirby music. I've heard a lot of it before. Just speaking of which, Fountain of Dreams plays in, like, one of the final levels, and I was like, whoa, this is hitting pretty hard here, actually. It's pretty good. So. I do think Smash Brothers Melee was basically our first exposure to Kirby, and
was Smash Brothers our first Kirby game, I guess?
Probably. And Fountain of Dreams is a very cool level in that game.
Very iconic as well.
And it's iconic as well because it's like one of the only competitive friendly levels, wasn't it?
It's only allowed, you see it all the time because Melee competitive people, like, it's not on their ban list, basically. So that makes a lot of sense. Wonderful. So anyway, Kirby Triple Deluxe still holds up to this day, and I'm going to try this year to do a bit more of this, which is go back and play some older Nintendo games, because I feel like we've been lacking on that front recently. So
very good.
Bally, over to you with another platformer.
So you played this last year, and
I did. I played it when it came out.
And it's a free game. It's called Sheepy, A Short Adventure. It's currently only on Steam, to my knowledge.
Yes.
And I now have a Steam Deck, thanks to MBZ. And after a few issues, because it's not Steam Deck verified, so after a few issues where I had to go into settings and do all this stuff that I Googled, and I found a different control method.
Wow, you did actually message me about this, Bal. You figured it out yourself?
I did figure it out, because what's annoying is I figured it out, I played the game a bit, came back to the game like a couple of weeks later, and it had like forgotten what I had inputted the first time. I had to like redo my whole thing. Anyway, the downside was that I essentially worked out some sort of WASD control method, which suddenly made my analog sticks work. But the downside was that when I got a new ability in the game, it would give me the keyboard equivalent, not the Xbox
the button equivalent,
which was a bit frustrating. And I'm sure there would have been another, if I had MBZ's technical prowess, I'm sure I could have done a better control setup. But anyway, it worked out in the end. But yeah, this is a very, very short 2D platformer. I'd even go as far as to say it's kind of in that kind of cinematic 2D platform. And what I mean by that is like, it's quite story driven. It's like a little bit Inside-y or Planet of Lana in terms of like its setup. Maybe nowhere near as story driven as a game like Planet of Lana, but it's that kind of short, I would call it cinematic platformer, and I love that about it. I don't think there's enough 2D platformers that are cinematic. Like, certainly not in the Nintendo realm, and they're obviously such a king of kind of 2D platformers. And then even games like Celeste that are very story driven, they're cinematic in maybe a slightly different way, but this game works really nicely. And sure, there were a couple of places where I didn't fully understand where to go next, because you're basically playing as this little sheep, and you're kind of
beautiful animation, by the way, just like a gorgeous looking
really
game.
gorgeous, like lighting, animation. The fact that this game is free is wild, and you're kind of going deeper underground, and then there's a couple of story beats. I don't really want to spoil it. Kind of takes you elsewhere, let's say, and it's just a really well put together, cool thing that I really want more of. And there's actually an email in the next segment that kind of talks about what kind of games we want in short 2D, not in a 2D space, and I can get to that next segment. But like, this is the kind of thing I want to see like more of, because it's just paced very nicely. There's even like a couple of boss fights in there. And it's always difficult. What do you do with 2D platformers and boss fights? But I think this game handles it okay. And one of the bosses was a bit finicky. But
I can't remember what they do. I think the final one I remember, if you like going across the platforms and pressing things, right? But I can't remember what else they do around that.
Yeah, there's another one earlier where you're like dodging, and then you have to use one of your moves into the side of him, and like you get moves that affect your traversal. So there's like a sideways dash, and there's one part in the game where you're just doing big long dashes across like vast space, which just looks really cool and is done in a very, like, the music builds while you're doing it. That's what I think is so cool about this game, is like there's a real score to it that adds impact to the mechanics of what you're doing, which for like a free small 2D platformer, it felt very unexpected and was very impressive. I thought this was going to be more like a what's the type, like when it's Super Meat Boy or Celeste, they've got a name.
A precision
platformer. And there is like precision platforming, but it's very minimal versus the whole general feel for the whole thing of what this game is going for. Like, it's not a big part of the game. So for that, I think it's very cool. Everyone should try this game. If you have a Steam Deck or a PC or something that can play this, definitely give it a go. It's on the short side of short. When people say like a game is short, like this game, I guarantee will be even shorter. Like, I think it said like 45 minutes on how long to beat. Now for me, that will mean, it'll be like an hour and a half.
That means 2.5 hours.
Or at least more than 45 minutes. And it actually wasn't. I think I might have done it in like, let's say 50 minutes, but it was genuinely,
I think, maybe an
short.
hour or so it took me, I remember.
It's genuinely a very short game, and everyone should play it. And I really want to play more games like this. It's refreshing to play it's like a very cool modern take on a 2D platformer. So yeah, everyone definitely go check out Sheepy, A Short Adventure. And yeah, be warned, on Steam Deck it's difficult to get it working on the right format, but I'm sure everyone's smarter than me, so you'll be fine.
Yeah. They all know how to do piracy and stuff, so it's all good. I can't remember if I talked about this on a show or not, or maybe I just mentioned it to you, but I was aware of this game because it was one of the first developer not interviews, but developer conversations I had working at my job, in terms of like looking for games to publish and stuff like that. So it was, I think, the first meeting I was in, and I remember talking to the guy. So context on this game, this is made by, like, it was funded essentially by a YouTube guy called Mr. Suicide Sheep. And so Mr. Suicide Sheep on YouTube is a music YouTuber. He does like synths and like that kind of like type of music, but he like makes his own original music. And I assume a lot of the music in the game is from that guy who's doing it. But he basically partnered with some folks to make a game based on the mascot of his channel, who is this little sheep character. And so, back then when we were talking about it, it was the idea was like it was kind of going to be a bit of a promotional thing, and even then they were like, yeah, we're probably not going to charge for it. It's probably just going to be a thing we're going to try out and see how we do, and then maybe from there we'll do another one. But I remember it, and then a few years later, like 3 years later, it came out, and I was like, oh shit, that's that game that I talked to you a long time ago. And I'm pretty sure I played a build of it. I played an early build of it that was quite good, and kind of knew it was going to be quite good early on. So I was very happy that it turned out well. And I think at this point they could probably do a full-blown version, right? It seems like it was really positively received, and I think a lot of people would like to see, take this idea a little bit further, maybe go in a bit of a Metroidvania direction potentially. And I think you could could have something pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's definitely like a bit of an Animal Well aesthetic to it.
definitely,
as well,
definitely.
Was
And it's the
pretty
perfect
cool.
example of the type of game that just wasn't talked about in the circles that I follow, and that without someone like MBZ, I definitely just wouldn't have heard of it. And so, yeah, thank you for shouting out MBZ. It's that kind of game that, the deep dives, obviously between your job and following Steam closely and all these other things. It's a lot of deep dive games.
And anytime I find a game that's an hour long and a platformer, I will immediately tell Bally about it, because I know that's what he's looking for just as much as I am. So
and hands up, like I'm playing a lot of Expedition 33, and I've been traveling, and like when I was in Turkey, didn't manage to play anything, unfortunately. So like, it's hard to at this point in my life to play enough games to talk about on the show. So it was definitely a good candidate for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, I've got one more thing to talk about. Chants of Sennaar. So I don't know how much you know about this game, Bally, but it had some people talking about it a couple of years back.
It's like a very linguistic-y game, which I knew would appeal to you.
Yes. So Chants of Sennaar, I would say, falls into this realm of detective-style games that have come into vogue. I would argue after the release of the critically acclaimed Case of the Golden Idol, we saw a few more games in that vein. Obviously, like Obra Dinn was the genesis.
Obra Dinn was before Case of Golden Idol, right?
Of course, yes. But I think the interesting thing that happened was Obra Dinn came out and there were no influenced games after. Like, it was very hard to find a detective game post Obra Dinn.
Right.
And so it took a few years, I think, for them... Because I believe what happened was Mark Brown made a video about detective games. And used Obra. I think that was actually before Obra Dinn came out, and he was like, we need more games doing stuff like this. And then Obra Dinn came out and it was like, okay, this is what it's going to do. And I think I'm pretty sure that Color Grey, the developers, watched that Mark Brown video and were like semi-inspired by that to create Case of the Golden Idol. And so it was interesting in that way that came out. And then after that came out, there was actually quite a few games that came out following it that were also doing a more cerebral detective style puzzle solving thing. And I would argue that Chants of Sennaar was probably the most visible of those, and also the most successful. Like, Chants of Sennaar has done extremely well, and I think part of that is its aesthetic. It's a very pretty looking game, and has this very bright kind of yellow, like very kind of strong aesthetic in how it kind of like puts itself across. I don't know how I'd best describe it, but it's very punchy in its colors, and it's very clear and kind of crisp and sharp. And so the game is about, like you mentioned, Bally, linguistics. It's a language learning game, by which I mean, when I say language, the essential way that it breaks down is that you have a set of like 35 words, and when you first start this game, you have no idea what anybody's saying because you're walking around and you'll talk to somebody and their speech bubble will come up and it'll be just a bunch of random symbols and you'll be like, well, I have no idea what that means, right? And so what they do is slowly but surely they kind of give you ways of understanding what something could mean, what it could be indicating. So I think the best example is you come to a door and there's like two words on the thing, and one of them is, so it'll have like one symbol that's like a circle, one that's like a triangle, and then another one that's also a circle and like an upside down triangle, for example. And so you look at that and you move the lever one way and it opens the door, and you move the lever the other way and it closes the door. And so what you're supposed to interpret from that is, the word for door must be that circle because it's the same between both of them. The word for open must be this one, and the word for close must be that one. So the triangle is one.
Do you write all this down, or is it noted for you? Or
yeah, so what happens is whenever you see a new symbol, it gets added to your little log of symbols. Cool. And what you can do is you can click on those and you can type in what you think it means at the time. So you can be like, oh, I think this means this, and then you type it in. And what eventually happens is that you'll kind of get like this journal, and the journal will give you pages that show like an image of something. So let's use this door example, right? It will show you an image of an open door and an image of a closed door, and then we'll also show you something else. And similar to Obra Dinn, it will verify in groups. So in Obra you would verify names by doing like 3 names. If you got 3 correct names at once, it would verify all those and say, yes, you are correct. Here, it's about the pages. So you might have 4 different images, and you drag the symbol in next to the image to say, like, I think this means door, I think this means table, I think this means spoon, and you drag those in. And if they are all correct, it will verify them, and it will say, yes, this one means this. So you know when a word means something, because they will verify it, and they will say, yes, that is what that means. I will say that this style of learning happens mainly in the first area, and then they do some interesting stuff. So you're actually learning 5 different languages throughout this game. And again, I say language, I mean like a set of about 30 words. And the interesting part is that you will eventually be translating between these languages. And so when you get to the second area, some of the things that you verify against are like, you'll see a broken pillar and it will have symbols from the first language that you, at this point, you'll have fully translated that first language, so you know all the words in it, and then you'll have a bunch of symbols from another language that you don't know yet, and you can match the symbols to whatever's beneath it and use the first language to verify the second language. So you're at a point where you're not even using English to figure out what this means. You're using a symbol that you know means something to verify another thing that you don't know what it means yet. So there's a bit of crossover there happening, and the further you get, the more that happens.
Which is a big part of linguistics, is like those common crossover languages and things that translators use and stuff. Did this feel a bit like an ancient Greek exam at any point?
Honestly, a little bit, and I think that did kind of tickle my brain. Like, I do like languages. I do like, I mean, especially like when it's written down. Like, I'm not very good at speaking other languages.
I was gonna say, like, when you visited me in Brussels, like, I was doing all the heavy lifting,
the French, yeah.
Even though you were a higher set in French than me.
I'd forgotten all my French at that point. I was in the bin with that.
My pigeon French got us by.
Like I said last time, I think Capital J pointed this out on Discord, but as a British podcast, we have to say all the French stuff is bad. And of course, I did say in the description of the last show that Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is the best thing the French have ever done, which, to be honest, I actually wholehearted believe, regardless of whether I was dunking on the French or not. It's a pretty incredible piece of work. But anyway, so yes, there is that kind of like, you know, figuring out what something means, like having the context clues. Like there's a part of the game where you are working out numbers, which is interesting as well, because suddenly numbers come into it and you're like, oh, this is how they write 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And you'll eventually come across a thing and you're like, oh wait, that's a clock. Oh, if I look at the clock, I can see what these are and I can verify those numbers against the rest of these, and I can figure out what the rest of the numbers are because I actually have a clock to use. So stuff like that, right? They use contextual stuff within the world to give you clues about what something could mean, so you can then figure out what it is. And it's very, very cool. I think they do some really cool stuff with it. There's certain rules as well, right? And I think there's some very cool things about languages. So, you know, Latin, for example, has a certain way in which, you know, a sentence is written with like a verb is usually at the end of a sentence, right? There's places where you put certain words and how the flow of a sentence works. So when you're translating from Greek or Latin, you are jumping, when you're translating, you're jumping from one word to another, and it's not the flow of it being said, it's the way that it's written down is a specific order, which is unique and interesting to the linguistics and how that works. There are specific things in this game where the first language, in order to denote a plural, so if you wanted to say people as opposed to person, you would say person. So you would use the symbol twice to indicate plural. And so if you wanted to say guards blocking door, you would say guard block door, because that indicates more than one, therefore plural. Versus the second language, where there's a specific symbol that's like a weird, like, curved little thing, and if you put that before a word, that denotes that word should be pluralized. And so every language, I'd say the consistent thing between them where they have differences is plurals and negatives. So if you want to say something is not something, then you have a specific symbol that denotes negative. But there are certain languages where you have to do it in a different way. And so it's really interesting the way that it's all put together, and like the order of things. I think it's the third or fourth language where they start with the object. And so you say the object of the sentence, and then you say subject verb. And so it gets to these points where when you're translating from that language to another one, even though the sentence might be, prophet opened book, you would have to say book, prophet opened. Like you would have to change the order for that language in order to get the correct answer.
That's very cool.
Very interesting kind of like use of language and understanding of different languages and the way in which things are ordered is very, very cool.
What was the background of the developer to want to make a game like this?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure actually too much about them. But it feels like they wanted to make a puzzle game that had these interesting mechanics, and they came to this idea of languages and kind of language learning as a vector through which you could do that. And I think there's also an interest here in like civilization and ancient languages and just ancient history, because this is basically set in the Tower of Babel, right? Is the idea. You're basically ascending this ancient tower, and this ancient tower has different cultures that have come to it over the years, and different ones have blocked off different paths and have like been like, oh, we're going to take over this area. Like the further you go up, you meet all these different cultures, and what you realize over time is that they have lost contact with each other. Like they are trying to communicate, but none of them can communicate because they don't understand each other's language, and so they've kind of lost that thing over time. Like they used to be able to communicate, but they don't anymore because they're so kind of sequestered off from each other. And the interesting part of it is like you go through and you do all the languages, you learn all the languages, and then the end of the game is you go to these specific terminals, and these are like the fast travel points, so you can travel between like the different areas without having to walk the whole way. And multiple people are trying to talk to each other, but they don't understand each other, and so you have to use your language learning in order to help them communicate with each other. And so there are these people who are trying to, there's a bunch of plants dying and they need to fix them, but only these other people know how to help, and so you basically input the symbols in order to get them communicating, and then that kind of changes something. So the end of the game is this kind of like going through and making everyone talk to each other, which I thought was very, very cool, the way it's implemented and all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's a super smart game.
They're actually a French developer.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So it's another thing that's come out of France.
Hey, look, the French, they're doing some good things. It's very cool. Yeah, and I do think that there is a weakness to this, and I think it's similar to how I felt about Obra Dinn, in that oftentimes you are going to have to explore a space, and a lot of so when you first enter a new area, it's very overwhelming and intimidating because you have no idea what anything means. And so you're just going around, you're seeing these symbols, and you don't know what any of the symbols mean. And so it's very much a slow burn of, okay, I'm just going to go around, I'm going to click everything, I'm going to collect all these symbols, and then hopefully by the time I've explored the whole area and I get back to the beginning, hopefully I will have learned something that then helps me to figure out a thing that will kind of cascade and then get all the boulders rolling, and eventually, at some point you start rolling downhill and you're like, oh, this word means this and this means this, and eventually it all just kind of comes together, right? But it's a bit of a process. You have to be quite patient, I think, in order to get through this, because it will require you just being like, I don't understand what's happening right now, and that's fine. I just need to go through it and make sure that eventually I'll find something that will lead me to a conclusion. And there are a lot of kind of intricate puzzles here in terms of, there's a whole thing where you have to like figure out what kind of metals are, and then you have to smelt them into a key that you then open a door, and all that requires an understanding of not only the language stuff, but then like the mechanics of the puzzle in order to do it, and you need the language in order to solve a puzzle. So there's quite a lot of layers to it, and by the end of the game. But I'd say the weakness the game has is in that exploration. There's no map really, and so you can get quite lost of, oh, I know I need to go back to that area, but I can't remember where that area was in relation to where I am now. And so I felt I had a lot of overtime in this game, a lot of expended, wasted time of wandering around trying to find my way back to places that I needed to go in order to accomplish things. And that was, I think, a little frustrating. I think, for me, once you have figured something out, it's the whole execution thing, right? Once you've figured out a puzzle, you want to be able to just apply it as soon as you can, because otherwise you're just like being frustrated by the execution part of it.
Yeah.
And I say the execution part of this is, I have to walk to that place, and so it's quite slow in terms of your walk speed, and you just have to there's different loading zones when you load from one screen to another, so it's a little laborious going to solve a puzzle when you already know what you need to do. Essentially, it's like it's the navigational part of it that I found a little frustrating, and it's harder to kind of keep it all in your head when you're like, oh, I remember I saw that thing, but that was on a desk in the library, and the library's all the way over there, but I guess I need to go check it, so I'm going to walk all the way over to the library, look at it, be like, that's what it was, then go all the way back. Again, something that hit video game Case of the Golden Idol solved quite nicely, is it was all on one screen, and you didn't have to go wandering around to find stuff. But I would say that's a weakness here, as much as it was an Obra Dinn for me, which is like the exploration side. And then there's also like, there's some stealth stuff in here which seems very weird and like ham-fisted, because one of the factions, they're kind of like hostile, and so you're like hiding around corners and like sneaking past guards and stuff like that, and it's very rudimentary from a mechanic standpoint, and it feels like it would have been better without it. So they try and add some tension by having that in there, but I found it ultimately a bit frustrating. And again, if you're going through areas again and it requires you doing more stealth again, it's not a great thing. So nice. Those are things that I don't think work quite as well, but the language stuff, the learning of the symbols, the way it's all kind of put together, I think is really tremendously good, and very, very engaging. I blasted through it within a few days. Like I was pretty into it. And I think the other thing is, like, you do have to play it within quite a condensed amount of time, because there's a lot of stuff you'll forget in terms of the rules of each language, right? And by the end, when you're translating between languages, if you don't have that in your head and you don't remember those specifics, you're going to have quite a hard time of it. So if you do play this, I recommend doing it within a short period of time, so that you don't lose all that knowledge and it doesn't kind of just disappear from your head. So
nice.
But yeah, I don't know if you have any interest in checking this out or something.
I would like to. It's just another one of those. It's on the list. I think I described how I process all games I'm interested in last episode. This is definitely on the subs list for, was it last year this game came out? So
I think 2-3 years ago.
So I'll look it up and get it on the subs list for that year. And who knows when I play games on my subs list, but they are on my mind. That's the key part.
I was going to say that this one might be a bit of a heavy lift for you in terms of brain dumping stuff when it's like you're exhausted and you're like, you've already talked about forgetting stuff and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that this might be one you'll have to sit on for a while before you can get to it and feel like you're in a good space. But
I'll get there. No, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I think it's very, very unique and super striking in terms of visual. I think it has some cool stuff to say, so definitely recommend people check out Chants of Sennaar. Lovely.
Before we end this segment, I've got a list of things, and I just need your opinion on how important you think they are. Okay, so we've got Braille, we've got the stethoscope, we've got the aqua lung, the film camera, blood transfusions, the hot air balloon, the sewing machine, the hairdryer, the pencil sharpener, the stapler, photography, motion pictures, the parachute, aspirin, canned food. Do you see where I'm getting at?
I have no idea what you're talking about or what this list means in any way, Valley.
Your claim is that Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is the best, most important thing to come out of France.
I see.
And I think this list would beg to differ. I think that's an important point to say.
Well, you're wrong, because I don't think any of those come even close to the importance of Expedition 33.
They are very important, very important.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Bali's the French defender on here, so send all your hate mail to me instead. Yes, good stuff. Great. Well, we are going to take a break. We'll be back right after that with your email. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is that time again. It's time for emails. Please, we always want more. We are referencing a couple of quite old emails this time, but we do try to get through the ones we're keen on for sure. We do get there. So if you would like to send an email into the show, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We also have a channel on our Discord server. It's called Emails. Pop a comment, a question, anything you like over in there, and we'd also appreciate that. Right, our first email this time is from Brett. It says, "Hey, Embittered and Bally. Recently, we've seen a lot of this. Like I said, this is quite old. Recently, we have seen a lot of games gain new life switching over to 2D, like Yooka-Laylee and Rayman. It seems like other companies are going to start following suit, judging by the upcoming Prince of Persia game. Nintendo, on the other hand, is willing to continue on with 2D and 3D versions of their top IP, like Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. Can you guys talk about some 3D franchise you would like to make a new 2D game, potentially as a spin-off 2D franchise? Personally, I would love to see a franchise like Pokemon go back to their 2D games in the style of HD 2D and branch off their 3D games more in the direction of Legends Arceus. Let me know what you guys think, Brett."
Yes.
Intriguing.
It is intriguing. I think it's interesting as well because I do think that of all the companies in the world, Nintendo are the one who are the most consistent with doing both types of games, right, these days, especially in the AAA space.
Echoes of Wisdom just came out last year, long after this email.
Right.
Like, I think
that's
a very modern yet 2D game.
For sure, yeah. And I do think 2D is just like, it's not even touched by other big companies, right? Like, they don't even consider it as something they should do.
No.
So it's, it is curious because there are lots of like other IP that you could take into 2D, but it's a question of like whether that would make any sense at all, because they're so kind of locked in on their kind of like 3D outings. But there's definitely some Nintendo ones as well that I do think would be interesting to visit.
Yes.
I think the one that I always talk about that is like, can we please get a different type of game in this universe? It's so popular now, it makes so much sense. A 2D Splatoon game, I think, could go pretty hard, you know? I think you could do something very clever with it. And, like, the swimming through ink stuff, I think, works quite well in a 2D setting. We've already seen a little bit of it in the way that it functioned in Smash Brothers, where you basically hide underneath it. And, like, you can imagine a world where you are deploying the mechanics of Splatoon, or at least some of the ideas of Splatoon, in a 2D setting, and where it could work quite well, right? You could almost see it working in some ways like... what's the name of the power in Tears of the Kingdom where you go through the floor into the ceiling?
I can't
Ascend,
remember.
right?
Yes,
Ascend, I think.
Yes.
So you could almost imagine like painting a ceiling and then like going through that up to another floor or something like that, right? Like, I think there's some cool ways in which that game could deploy some of Splatoon's mechanics. And I don't know, would you make it a Metroidvania? Would you make it a 2D platformer? I'm not sure, but I think there are avenues you can go down for a 2D Splatoon game that I think would be quite fun and quite mechanically rich. So that's definitely the one that jumps out to me as like the most obvious. I would like to see a 2D spin-off of this. But again, that's more directly translating the mechanics. It's a reverse of what Nintendo did with the N64 generation, right? You'd be asking them to be like, this thing has only ever existed in 3D. What does its 2D iteration look like, right? And could you make that compelling? Could you do something interesting with it? And I certainly think they could.
I think when you compare Mario 64, Metroid Prime, and Zelda Ocarina of Time, all three were the first iterations of 3D games of previously 2D franchises. Like, I think they all, and I think arguably they all do it fantastically well. I think the one I like the most in terms of like, wow, they translated that feeling of the 2D game into the 3D game the best, I would argue might be Metroid Prime, where that game structurally and everything about, like, even to the point of like those spiny enemies that go around a platform, and then there is a 3D platform with a spiny enemy that goes around. That's a very simplistic example, but the way that like doors link up and the world links up together is so Super Metroid, but in a 3D setting. It's just incredibly impressive. And I guess you can say it's similar about Ocarina of Time, the way that the structure of A Link to the Past you can almost directly map onto Ocarina of Time and some of the beats and kind of things that game is doing. I think it's incredibly impressive.
Mario 64 is actually the most radical of those. Like, it is vastly different in its approach and its design to 2D Mario games, which I think in some ways makes it the most impressive of the leaps to 3D.
You've got the castle, you've got the paintings, you've got worlds you go in that you're then doing levels within worlds, whereas the whole world layout of a game like Super Mario World is completely different in many senses.
You have HP, for God's sake, right? Mario doesn't shrink or grow. Like, he has a health bar, and like the star structure. Like, Mario 64 is a far more radical game than I think people give it credit for, in the sense that, like, yes, you can say that Zelda and Metroid basically took the design language of their 2D counterpart and translated it into 3D, whereas Mario reinvented itself for 3D, which I think is pretty fascinating.
I think what Brett talks about with Pokemon actually is interesting, where I think we've talked about this before, but Pokemon's almost worked its way into this kind of 3 different SKUs at the moment. You've got the kind of Legends series, like Arceus, was it Arceus Legends?
Legends Arceus,
that is 3D, more open world. It's kind of, it's a lot less, it's more expansive. They're like breaking the mold on what Pokemon does. You've then got the traditional games, and then arguably I would say the 2D games are now the reboots, or the re-releases. What would you call them? I guess they are remakes. So the last one was Diamond and Pearl. Like, that was that clearly a 2D game that had been remade and was still 2D. Like, I think that's where I would argue Pokemon see their kind of 2D series. Could a future remake of the next what's after Diamond and Pearl, Black and White?
Black and White,
Could Black and White be HD 2D? Potentially, that'd be awesome, but like, I do think that remake lineage is definitely where they see the 2D games. I'd be shocked if the mainline or Legends went back to kind of a 2D look, but I don't know, we'll see.
I think that HD 2D is an interesting option for a lot of games. I do want other games to try a slightly different visual style to that. I think you can still do sprites, but modernized in a way that is a bit different to the way that HD 2D does it, and I would like to see a Pokemon attempt at that. I think that would be very, very cool. But yeah, I mean, it does make a lot of sense for lots of those games to reinvent themselves in a way that's a bit more streamlined like that. So that would be quite good.
I was talking about Sheepy in the first segment and how I kind of think it's a bit like a cinematic platformer. And this is a criticism we both share about the industry generally, but the industry is incredibly beholden to and sucks up to and worships 3D action, behind the back, narrative driven experiences in a way that where these games, there are obviously tons of exceptions. I think Balatro is a great one. But these games predominantly win the awards. They're often the highest budget games. They are rewarded and praised often for their storytelling. Sometimes those games can be arguably mechanically not as interesting as a lot of like indie games and other games. We've talked about these themes in depth on the show. I want these developers, like the Naughty Dogs of this world, to really think about, right, Naughty Dog are lauded for their narratives. I don't personally think they're lauded for their mechanics. I think there are some very strong mechanics in their games, but I don't think they're lauded for their mechanics. And the cinematic nature of their storytelling we've talked about, and we've gone back and forth a bit, but like, it is very close to, you've seen it with like Last of Us HBO show. It's very close to.
You could argue that it's better as a TV show than it is as a game, but that's some people's opinion.
I wouldn't go that far, but that's where I'm going, and I do think there's unique things about a game like Last of Us Part 2, and we disagree on this, MBZ, where I think there's things that game does that I think you can only do through a game, but actually they're trying to replicate on the show very closely, so we can get to that another time. But my point is, I want Naughty Dog to try and make a game in 2D that is narratively as impactful as a game like Last of Us or Uncharted in 2D. Can they do it? Do these studios have the narrative chops to get all the lauded praise and all the industry worshipping them if they were told it has to be a 2D game? You cannot make it cannot be 3D. And when you think about the nature of like a 2D game versus 3D, and you think about kind of 2D games that have narrative, I think of something like A Planet of Lana. I talked about this in the first segment, but like, not almost always, but often they become silent games. Like the idea of speech, either they become text based or they don't have speech, and that's where I'd be really interested with a studio like Naughty Dog, where they clearly believe that voice acting is incredibly important. It's not just voice acting, it's facial capture, like the full suit, with the camera facing these actors' faces. They clearly believe that is so important that's it. I'd be interested to know, someone like Neil Druckmann, is that the only way you think you can tell your narrative, or do you think you could pull that off in a 2D setting? Now it might be like, okay, Bally, you're basically handcuffing Naughty Dog for no apparent reason, and I'd argue that this is a counter to them crutching on cinematography. So like in the same way that the same reasons that the Last of Us HBO show are, in your view, MBZ, and largely in my view, the same reason those two series are impactful, whether it's game or TV show, is the way that the cutscenes are shot, the way that the thing is shot, the way that the story is portrayed,
the performances, right,
the way that the actors emote their emotions on camera. Like, can you replicate that level of impact and narrative in a 2D setting? Now, let's say you had you almost do like a 2D version of Last of Us Part 1, let's say, and then when something impactful happens, and I'd highlight a game a bit like Nine Souls, where when something impactful happens, it'll just do a splash screen, a quick splash screen of like this comic book art with something like a facial expression or something impactful happening. Like, what if you told Last of Us like a comic book, and it's 2D, but then
they did do that, by the way. I think I'm pretty sure they made a comic book of Last of Us at some point. Yeah.
But what if you made a game comic book? So like it's a 2D game, and then when something impactful happens, you still have voice acting, but you get the splash screen. You get a quick pop up of like a bead of sweat, or this like it's you're getting the facial impact that I would argue Naughty Dog stand by very closely, and a big part of the reason they're so into facial capture and all these things. So, and I'd hold this challenge to like all the Sony first party kind of third person behind the back storytelling and games like Assassin's Creed and these other ones. Like, can you pull off your narrative chops in a 2D setting? Because I am fed up with the industry being, whenever it comes to narrative, it always leans towards the big budget AAAs, and as much as there are some really impactful narrative games that move away from that, I still think like 90% of the games that reviewers lord over are the AAA space when it comes to narrative, and I really want 2D to really grasp narrative when it comes to the next 10 years, for example. And as much as you're very mechanics focused, MBZ, I still like narratives play a huge role in this industry, and massive, yeah. And as much as the industry is about mechanics, I think arguably the industry is more about narrative. That we could debate that separate time, but like I think that like it would be so cool to see a real focus on narrative in a 2D space, where I feel like we've not had enough of it personally.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to your point, right? Like, it's not a 2D game, but obviously it's a lower budget game. But 1,000 Times Resist came out last year and is maybe the best narrative in any video game ever made, and wasn't nominated for Game Awards at all for best narrative.
Exactly.
Which speaks to like
the way the industry is skewed,
the way that it works, right? Yeah. And like, was Hellblade nominated for best narrative?
Right, I'm going to look up the narrative.
Yeah,
I think the narrative of Hellblade 2 was pretty good. I think it probably should have been nominated, but
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely like some stuff in there where I just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's interesting you bring up like how you would convey a narrative in 2D, because I do think there are some good examples out there, like not through voice acting but through just good writing. A Space for the Unbound that you mentioned as being a game that you would like to play at some point. That game is a very impactful, very emotional narrative, and it's all done through written text, right? But you read it and you absorb it. There's no voice acting, but I think the writing there carries it so strongly.
Night in the Woods is another 2D game.
Night in the Woods, of course, probably the best example. Do you
want to know the best narrative nominees?
Sure, what were they?
Right, Metaphor Fantasio, that game also won.
Deserved, yeah.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, puke. Like a
not
Dragon
deserved in any fucking universe
like
that
a Dragon
exists.
Infinite Wealth.
Also probably not deserved.
Fair enough. Senua's Saga,
yeah.
Hellblade 2, and then Silent Hill 2. All these games have huge AAA budgets, right? I think that's the most depressing thing, and kind of plays into what we're getting at, is that it's just like, are you telling me those are the 5 strongest narratives?
Yeah, best written games of the year.
And as you say, I think I will play 1,000 times Resist, and it will be a far more impactful narrative than any of these games by a mile. And that's exactly what we're getting at.
Yeah, it's, of course, this is how the industry works, because it's a popularity contest at the end of the day, and when awards get voted on, it's like, you go to the masses, and the masses have to, acclimatize around what have they actually played, and people hadn't played it. But the fact that 7 Rebirth is on that list and 1,000 Times Resist is not, is frankly one of the most embarrassing things to ever happen.
What time of year did 1,000 Times Resist come out?
It came out early in like April or something, it was around for a while. Again, look, I didn't get around to it until right at the end of the year, but I think it makes a point, right? That's the kind of thing that people focus on when it comes to narratives in games. So, but Night in the Woods and Space for the Unbound, I think, are two really good examples of like excellent narratives in 2D games, and both not voice acted, but just lean on their impeccable writing to carry them through, really. So, So I'd be curious to see, like, what does a God of War 2D game with like you just read the dialogue? How, like, the question for me is, does that dialogue actually hold up, or is it being lifted by the performances?
These are the questions I want to know. I see. My view would, I want the voice acting. Do the voice actors come across in the same way when they're depicted in this 2D way version?
Well, you could argue like Octopath Traveler and Octopath Traveler 2 are kind of this, right? Because they actually do have voice acting for 2D games, so, and that's pretty impactful, I would say.
When you play those games, there is a slight juxtaposition, and that's clearly why The Last of Us goes for cinema. When we say cinematic, I mean like photorealistic kind of look to it. And there is a juxtaposition when you hear a character in Octopath say like, look, I'm going to swing my sword. I don't know what line they're going to say. I'm going to swing my sword. I'm going to use this spell, or you traitor.
Yeah.
Like there is a
I think, to be fair, they do a pretty damn good job with expressions on characters' faces for such a kind of like small sprite.
I totally agree. And what they also do is especially in Octopath Traveler 2, they play with the camera and the music, and they do everything that a film actually would do, other than be photorealistic and have actors.
We can go all the way back to Final Fantasy VI. What was one of the main points we brought up on that episode was the fucking finger wag in Final Fantasy VI, and how much character that invokes. I think even back then you're giving so much rich depth to these characters just through those subtle animations and the limitation of the system. Like, again, I think limitation breeds creativity. So in that way, I would be fascinated to see what that would
To the Moon, another very impactful story.
To the Moon, 100%.
Again, the pixel art, top down. I just want this to be like a fun challenge for one of these studios to try and do something as impactful, and for them to feel the frustration when their game doesn't get nominated in Best Narrative of the Year, and be like, oh, actually, it's not just the voice acting and the the way we tell our story that is what is important. It's also the budget, and and I think that's an important thing I want to think about, because I think the essence of this question, in my view, focuses a lot more on mechanics, and I agree that 2D games arguably are more mechanics driven than 3D games, in grand sweeping statements, arguably, especially in the modern video game space. But that's where I just really want the wheel to be broken, as it were, and to actually get that impactful 2D but in a traditional sense.
I think just to go through some other examples I've written down. So 2D to 3D, I would love to see 3D to 2D. I'd love to see Star Fox try 2D and see what that would be like, because it's a game, again, it's an old Nintendo franchise, but one that has only ever been in 3D, because even on the Super Nintendo,
side scrolling or top down,
I would say like side scrolling, like you would have side scrolling shoot 'em up kind of style levels combined with getting out of the ship and then
if it was
running
combined
around
with like top down mini shoot style levels.
That's a great shout.
It's your side-scrolling shooter, and then there's the space parts that are top-down space shooter.
Exploring all of space in your ship from like a mini shoot perspective. That would be very cool. Yeah. And then you could do like a Blaster Master thing where you hop out and it suddenly turns to like 2D Fox running around and shooting things. And again, with both the Splatoon and Star Fox examples, my go-to is, well, make it a Metroidvania, because that's how you you get abilities and stuff and it makes it interesting. But I think that's kind of my default when it comes to like how do you translate some of these, because if you want to keep some of the complexity of those games, you kind of want to have something a little bit more like that. Although you could turn Star Fox into like a side-scrolling action game, like you could do not like Devil May Cry, but like you could get some like Nine Souls-esque combat in there, like do something a little bit more fanciful with it. I could see that happening. So that might be a thing to think about. Again, I think Final Fantasy going back to 2D would be so funny to me, and I think basically what they should do is they should make a game that has the perspective of Final Fantasy VI, right? Like it's the top-down view, but like spend $70 million on it, right? Like, make it the best-looking 2D game you have ever seen. Like, don't do HD 2D, just do a pixel art game, but make it the most lavish pixel art you have ever seen in your life. Like, do unbelievable sprite design. Like, if Final Fantasy 17 was that would be incredible, and I think that would be such a cool thing to do. But like, I wouldn't advocate for what you were saying with like the reducing the budget for like those other games going to 2D. I would say keep the budget the exact same and see what you can do with a 2D game.
Yes.
With Final Fantasy specifically, and be like, just spend $100 million on a 2D Final Fantasy. I would love to see what that would get you. That'd be fascinating to me. And then I think the last one for me would be so this has happened a couple of times where AAA franchises have tried 2D games. So Assassin's Creed tried this, where they did like the India one and the China one, where it was like, oh, we're going to do like 2D side-scrolling platformers as Assassin's Creed games. And those were poorly received because they weren't very good. They didn't really put much effort or work or time into them. But, one of the greatest stealth games of all time, Mark of the Ninja, is a 2D action game. And an Assassin's Creed stealth-focused thing with a Mark of the Ninja sensibility, I would love to see what that would look like. I think that would be really cool. I think if you gave it to a good studio and were able to leverage it in that way, I think, similar to what they did with Prince of Persia, right? Like they made a 2D Prince of Persia. I think Assassin's Creed is in that same lineage of Prince of Persia. I think that would be a cool game to try something like this with.
You've just answered my questions on like 2D Last of Us. Like you can do the bottles, and there's loads of like there's lots of things you can take from Mark and the Ninja that you could do on a stealth 2D game like a Last of Us or something.
Of course, yeah.
Because I think that's the pushback Naughty Dog would have, is they say this was their challenge and they had to do it. They'd be like, but the mechanics just wouldn't. They wouldn't even talk about the cinematics and that being reduced.
No.
They'd say the mechanics just wouldn't work, and it's like, oh, actually, you could do that,
There's an example of how it could work for sure. And then I wrote down Animal Crossing and Xenoblade just because they're two 3D games that haven't been put into 2D, but I don't know what I would do with either of them, Like, Animal Crossing in 2D is basically the same game. It's just, like, it looks more like Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley now, I guess. And Xenoblade, I don't fucking know how you would translate that to 2D. I don't think it makes any sense to, but because so much of the joy of that game is the splendor of the world and the scale and the scope. I think that's one thing that is very difficult to achieve in 2D, is that same sense of scope and scale of a world. So
no, definitely.
But yeah,
any
other examples that you have, Bally, or
not particularly. I just feel very strongly about the point I've already made, basically.
Sure.
But yeah, I agree with you on stuff like Splatoon and the few Nintendo games that haven't tried 2D yet. I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I was going to be like, Pikmin, Chibi Robo, then I was like, oh wait, they did those, and they were both bad platformers on the 3DS, and maybe let's not do that again, so that's a shame.
But yeah, no, very, very good question, Brett. Our next question is from friend of the show, Matt Lorgan. This was also from a while ago. Hi, I'm Zed and Bally. It was great hearing you both talk about Elden Ring on ThisNintendoLife last year. Well, I think it was a little while ago. Especially since it was the first experience for both of you with From Software's games. It seems like Elden Ring has been the best jumping on point for FromSoft. Jumping on point for FromSoft. God, that's hard to say so far, and it made me wonder if it had either of you interested in going back and exploring the rest of From Software's catalogue. I wasn't able to get into the Soulsborne games until Bloodborne, but from there I went on to play and complete Dark Souls 3, Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, and loved all of them. Do either of you have the urge to go back to those older games now that you're more familiar with the genre? And what were games that you've played in the past that introduced you to genres that you didn't think you'd like otherwise? Keep up the great show, as always. All the best, Matt Lorgan. As always, Matt is just fantastic at like playing all the games in the series when he's interested in one of those games, and this is another.
Yes, go back and just
example.
mine the history.
Yeah,
for sure. I think I definitely am curious about going back to the catalogue. I mean, it's nice that we're getting From Software exclusive on Switch too, so that's another way in which they're starting to cater to Nintendo fans a little bit. But obviously, Duskbloods is going to be a multiplayer thing, so it's slightly different. But I think like this year especially, playing Nine Souls and Expedition 33 back to back, I'm like, I really should play Sekiro, shouldn't I? Like, I've played 2 games where parrying is like such a core focus, such a fundamental part of combat, and I've loved both of them. They're both like probably 2 of the best games I played this year, and everyone's like, well, yeah, Sekiro, that's the one, that's the parry one, that's the one you want to go to. So I think of all of them, that's the one that speaks to me the most and the loudest right now. But I would like to visit a lot of them. I think Sekiro's easier because, you know, we talked about this before, but the aesthetics of Dark Souls, it's so gloomy and dreary and scary that it's hard for me to pick up and play Dark Souls. I would like to probably play it on like a Steam Deck or something. I think Dark Souls on Steam Deck would be a good way to go, because there's that like little bit of remove and it makes it easier for me to play it. I have noticed that From Software games, they never go below 50% off on Steam. Like, you look at the Steam sales and they've never gone below 50% off. So they have a little bit of a Nintendo thing going, not as drastic as Nintendo, but you know, it's not like I'm waiting for a sale for one of these, because it's never going to go down in price beyond that. So I just need to make a decision one day and be like, right, I'm going to buy Sekiro and I'm going to give it a go and I'm going to play it, and I'm sure I will enjoy it greatly. But yeah, that's where my kind of From Software journey will probably take me next. I guess for you, Bally, it's just finishing Elden Ring in like 10 years time, probably.
Yeah, so I famously played 30 hours of Elden Ring when in and around, well, after Bally Jr. was born, and I've also said before in the show, that's probably one of the worst games possible to be trying to play when you're trying to fit in like an hour of gameplay time in the evening when you're following like a baby monitor and trying to watch that in case Bally Jr. wakes up and I need to go through and give him milk. This was back in 2022, obviously. He's older now. So that's a big reason why I wasn't able to get through that game. It's also hard to play like a very dark... It's not just dark and gloomy and creepy. It's also a damn challenging game. So like the combo, booting that up at night and wanting to play that, like I did find it hard at the time. But I also love that game. I really do respect it, and I do want to go back to it. I'm now back in the thick of it in terms of childcare when it comes to like Ballychew, and now I'm watching his monitor again. So my approach is, I want to beat Elden Ring before I move on to like trying other From Software games. So I'm at this point in my life, I'm just accepting I can't do that. I need to wait till Ballychew's older. Once I have larger, more laid back windows to play games where it doesn't matter if I can't pause the game, for example, that's when I would like to finish the rest of Elden Ring. And I really was enjoying my build, so I'd be happy to just continue from 30 hours in and go from there. That's my attitude at the moment. Let's say a world in 2030 or whatever, once I've beaten Elden Ring, yes, I would love to play. I would happily play Bloodborne. I'd happily play Sekiro. I will say that playing Nine Souls this year, managing to play Nine Souls while feeling drained from a young baby and trying to fit in gaming windows was very stressful, and I did find that game incredibly emotionally draining. I really don't have that much energy for that type of game in my life. Nine Souls was almost like an exception because it was a Metroidvania and there's already a broad genre that we love. But I don't have it in me to play that level of game much at all at this point in my life. So the first one I want to get to, like I said, Elden Ring, I think I will enjoy playing the rest of that game. I think it'll be hard to get back into it, but once I'm there, I think I'll have a really good time. And then I would happily play, I think Bloodborne and Sekiro are probably the two most kind of modern ones I'd want to play.
See, the benefit that you have, Bally, is by the time you get around to Bloodborne, they will have actually re-released it in 60 FPS, and you can play the best version.
Exactly. So it's all worked out. But I love that. I respect that style of game design so much, just from the 30 hours I played of Elden Ring. I think I found the first 5 out of 10 hours very challenging, but I'd say 10 hours on or so, I got much more into it. But just wasn't a good place in my life to try and play that game. I find it particularly challenging for the reasons I've already given. And yes, MBZ will continue to mock me until I beat that game. But
that's fine. We'll be here in 2075, and Bally will be in the retirement home and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna finish Elden Ring next year," and I'll be like, "No, you aren't." Anyway.
Now, if that game gets a big discount on Switch 2, and I just want to play it a bit of handheld, maybe I'll go for that and I'll start a new save file. I don't know.
Yeah, but there you go. That's probably the best way to do it.
That
honestly.
might be the best way to do it. But otherwise, I am enjoying it.
Yeah, well, it'll have the DLC included as well, so it's even more hours for you to play. Jesus. Which, by the way, I haven't finished the DLC.
Right,
I played like 10 hours of DLC, and again, didn't go back to it because, again, like I said, I can only play Elden Ring on like Saturday mornings when it's sunny outside. Like, that's the way that I play that game.
2 kids holding you back, and you've still got like these specific gaming slots to play that game.
No, Bally, look, we're both scaredy cats.
We are
we've gone over
cats,
this before,
yes.
and this is how it goes. So, in any case, I think that's probably it makes it a bit harder. What were games that you've played in the past that introduced you to genres you didn't think you'd like otherwise, though?
Every game ever that MBZ's like, now I play this game.
I mean, the obvious one for me is like first-person shooters I'd never played really growing up. Like, it wasn't a genre. Like, obviously, all of our friends were like, "Oh, Call of Duty" and whatever, and loads of people played that, and it was like a cultural touchstone. I never really understood first-person games very much. I think part of it was I knew I had motion sickness for that sort of stuff, and so I was always a little bit wary of it. But I also, I just mechanically, I was like, I like platformers and I like these things that Nintendo does, and Nintendo had never done a shooter, right, of any kind, and I think that was why I was a little bit reticent to it. But then when I was getting a bit more into the industry and reading stuff, and like I believe back in like 2013, 2014, around I think 2013 E3, there was an interview that Gersman had during E3 with some of the folks from Respawn when Titanfall 1 got revealed, and the things they were saying about Titanfall and like the wall running, and there's actually like double jump and platforming, I was like, ooh, maybe this kind of like movement stuff is the way to get me into a first person shooter. And so I followed that game and I was kind of interested, and then I remember at launch it was actually, I got like a code for it quite cheaply. It was like £30 or something. I was like, okay, I'm willing to pull the ripcord here. I'm gonna try this shooter and see what it's like. And I fell in love. I was like, oh my god, what have I been missing my whole life? This is the whole genre of games that I've never really engaged with, and this has just opened my eyes completely to it. So that was definitely a big one for me, was like the first Titanfall getting me into first person shooters was pretty massive. And I think its follow-up in Titanfall 2 was another exceptional entry, and obviously they went on to make Apex Legends, which I very much enjoyed, and obviously went on to play Overwatch, and Overwatch became one of my favorite games of all time. So Titanfall was really like the genesis of getting me into a genre that I had pretty much completely written off and didn't have any interest in, and then just turned me around completely. So
nice.
That's the big one for me. What about you?
I can't even think for me. This is dad brain again, but like I've played so many games.
Danganronpa and visual novels.
That's
maybe,
a great point. Danganronpa and Ace Attorney that you gave me before that, I've enjoyed both of those.
I guess Ace Attorney would be technically the one, but I've never really thought of Ace Attorney as a visual novel because it has the deductive elements to it, right? I guess like back when Ace Attorney came out, the language, like we wouldn't have called something a visual novel, because I don't think visual novels in the discourse was like, you would have called it an adventure game, I think is what you would have called it, right? Like,
but Danganronpa's like massive on the deduction. as well. So.
Yes, it is. I think Phoenix Wright is slightly different in like the open-endedness of when you're able to, like, you can bring up any piece of evidence at any point during those cross-examinations.
Quite a lot more challenging.
versus Danganronpa, where it is a little bit more like, well, you're a little more constrained in like what arguments you can tackle and all that sort of stuff. So I would say Danganronpa is slightly more on the visual novel side versus the more adventure-y game elements, especially of the original Phoenix Wright games, because there was a lot of like in between the court sessions, you have the kind of exploration side, and there was lots of clicking to go to a place, going to another place, going back, talking to this person, talking to that person. It was more non-linear in its approach, and a game like Danganronpa is far more linear, and it's like, well, you go here, you find this out, and you go to the next section. So that's where the adventure game element, I would say, come in. But I'd say, regardless, I'd say both of those games are probably good examples of like getting you interested in something that you'd not really been into before.
I think this whole podcast has been a very slow build on JRPGs for me generally. Like,
Very true, yeah.
That I had big mixed issues with like Xenoblade 1, and that was arguably the first JRPG outside my comfort window, which before then was,
Was it the first non-Pokemon RPG you played?
Probably, which looking back is biting off quite a lot when I could have maybe have been Chrono Trigger or something.
Though to be fair, Xenoblade 1 was also for me like probably the first non-Pokemon RPG.
And you bounced off it and took a long time to beat as well, obviously.
It took me 3 years to finish Xenoblade 1, famously.
So yeah, definitely I think it's like a handful of JRPGs that really got me into it, I would say. I guess Octopath Traveler 1 is like the one where it all came together back in 2018.
Right.
It was like, wow, this is the one. This is what I want. And then you were saying how like Claire Obscura could be that for 3D, and so far it kind of is, and it's doing a lot of things that I love in JRPGs. So like I think that's a genre that I used to just not know much about at all, and now I love.
Was Assassin's Creed 4 your first open world game?
Yes, although I always count Wind Waker, but I know you don't like me.
Yeah, well, that's not. Look, come on. Look, let's talk about the modern definition here.
In terms of modern definition, yeah. No, I think it was the first. And yeah, I'm very into open world games.
But I guess like the point here is like play that introduced you to genres but I don't know, did you think you wouldn't like open world games?
No, exactly. And that was also when I bought a PlayStation in 2018. I didn't for a second think I wouldn't enjoy Spider-Man. That was the reason I bought the console. And then everyone was raving about God of War 2018. I thought I should probably pick that up as well. I didn't think for a second I wouldn't enjoy it, and I absolutely loved that game. Especially when I hadn't played anything like it before. It was incredibly impactful. I like to think I go outside my comfort zone a bit more than I sound like I'm describing. But I'm really struggling to think actually of other games that have just like really opened up a whole genre for me. But
or the stuff that you didn't think you would like, right? Like, because I was very against first-person shooters, or like I didn't think I would like them until one kind of convinced me.
Yeah, I think I was always like skeptical of Halo, and that was something that I really decided. Look, I've got Game Pass. They're all on here. I've looked up how long these campaigns are. They're really not that long. And I really enjoyed like the shooting element of those campaigns, not just like the story and everything else to do with them. And am I now into first-person shooters? No, not necessarily. But I'm open to like playing like a Titanfall campaign, for example. Like I'm open to all that stuff. And obviously I think I got pretty into Apex Legends when it first came out. I played a lot of that game. I can't claim that my FPS skills are barely good. They're pretty bad, to be honest. I'm a very frustrating partner to play with, for sure. But I still think that the shooter genre is something I need to play more, get better at, enjoy more. You opened up my eyes massively with Overwatch, for example, MBZ. That was a game that I was very much like, I might play it one day. I don't know. MBZ loves that game. And then you were like, Bally, it's on Switch. Let's do it. Here we go. And I found my character I wanted to play as in Winston. And that was really my style. And the rest is history. So that's another good example. But I wouldn't say it's like made me go on to play loads more hero shooters. But a lot of this is just,
not that there are any, to be honest. Like it's not like it's
well, exactly. But a lot of this is just finding the time. And since having 2 kids, like, and I think, was it last year or the year before, I realized I need to I need to play more games I'm into, because I think I was following the zeitgeist a little bit too much last year, where there were games at the bottom half of my top 10 games of the year that came out that year that I didn't love. Let's say they were very good, but like they weren't like, I feel like I can pick my games a bit stronger now, and that maybe stops me reaching out of my comfort zone a little bit at
Right,
times.
so what you're saying is that you're not going to do what Matt is talking about and try and find things you don't think you'd like otherwise, and just stay in your comfort zone, which I appreciate, you know.
I don't know. I've not talked about it on the show, but I've played like 3 hours of Blue Prince, and like that's an example of a game that massive zeitgeist. I had Game Pass from South of Midnight and gave it a go. So like, does that game have its hooks in me? Not yet. Would I be willing to play more? Probably. But can I fit it in with the rest of this year? Debatable. It's kind of like that zone for me.
Right.
And yeah, I've jumped out of my comfort zone a few times, but the number of times that it's latched on and made me play a bunch of other games in that genre, I don't think there's a ton of examples, and JRPGs are probably the best.
Yeah,
example.
and I think part of that is like lots of genres we were already familiar with and had played, and so there's only going to be limited amounts that you can then expose yourself to further. You know, for me, it's like there's so many PC style like RTS or 4X strategy or all those city building type games that I have never had any interest in, and I don't know if there will be one to convince me. And there probably is one out there, you know. Maybe I play Civilization 6 and suddenly I become a sicko for Civ 6, you know. Like that could very well happen. I just haven't attempted it yet, and I would like to at some point, you know. I would very much like to do that. I'd like to try and give it a go and see if it's for me. I have tried other things in that, like I tried playing Total War Rome or something that was free on Epic, and I think I spent like an hour and a half, and I didn't understand what the fuck was going on. I was like, this is not convincing me in any way, you know.
Does my 20 minutes of World of Warcraft back in the day count for anything?
Wait, you played 20 minutes of World of Warcraft?
I saw the advert on TV. They said it was like a free trial. I downloaded it. I booted it up.
No way.
And I had no idea.
How did I never know this? What?
I think I've told you before, but
I don't remember this at all.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I guess MMO. You've never played an MMO really, Bally.
No.
So that's,
this was when they had the Ozzy Osbourne promotion. Must have been about 18 years ago, I want to say. Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow.
Could
not
work
even
out a
I
thing.
have played World of Warcraft, you know?
Pardon?
So
not even you?
I've not played WoW, so...
I mean, I haven't either. I just booted
well, you played 20 minutes of it, apparently.
Couldn't.
So.
But yeah, it was just too overwhelming.
Damn. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, MMOs is an interesting one. Like, I guess RuneScape is the one that got me into MMOs, if you even count that as an MMO, which kind of is.
The most time-consuming genre of them all.
Oh, yeah. Like, I've got like 300 hours in Final Fantasy 14 and, you know, barely scratched the surface on that. So, you know, that's that genre, right? Like, that's how it is. But, you know, I don't really... MMOs are such a weird thing because I almost don't count them as video games. They're like a hobby, you know? It's a separate hobby to video games. So, it's like, if you play an MMO, I don't think you really are someone who plays video games. You're someone who...
Yeah.
You know, plays WoW, you know, it's a whole different...
They don't go well with podcasting in that sense, but yeah.
They go perfecly with podcasting.
As in, like, to do a podcast. Like,
Yes,
gaming time is what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. If you are trying to talk about interesting things on a show, you're right. But if you want to listen to podcasts, my God, there is not a better genre than MMOs for listening to podcasts.
Although I'm sure people hearing me talk about my first 20 minutes of WoW would be pretty interesting, to be honest, but it wasn't good.
Yeah. Anyway, great stuff. Bally, where can people send those questions if they want to write in?
If you'd like to write in, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And like I said at the top of the segment, channel in the Discord server called Emails. Go and check it out.
Yes, please do that. You can obviously find the show in various places across the internet. You can support us at Patreon. Patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can get bonus episodes and fun things like that. And Bally would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, we have a new patron who moved from a previous tier to the $10 tier. They are Nintendo Man, so thank you for your $10 tier support. Then thank you also to all of our other $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK Alan, Turtle, Orange Thunder, and Ali T. Thank you all for your $10 tier plus support, but also thank you to all of our other patrons. We really appreciate all the support you're giving the show.
Yes, very much appreciate that. We will be chatting about E3 stuff. I still call it E3, man. I can never not call it E3. Summer Game Fest is going to happen next month, so our Nintendo show will focus on Microsoft's announcements, PC gaming show.
When do you think Nintendo will do a direct?
I think after that, probably. I think they're going to wait until like July.
I think early July before DK would be my bet.
I think late July after DK, because then they can get out the marketing out the way.
I just know that they like to do directs before big games come out for weird reasons. This has happened in the past.
Sometimes. I think they might do a DK focus direct like 2 weeks before DK comes out, and then we'll get the full fat like summer direct after DK is out. So yeah, but yeah, well, there's no smoke on the street about Sony right now. Like, I don't know what they're gonna do if they have anything coming up, but they usually like to go in May, and we're almost at the end of May now, so not sure what's happening there.
Well, they've only got Ghost of Tsushima coming out this year, right? And like
Ghost of Yotei, yeah.
Yotei, sorry. Marathon. Is that?
Yeah, oh boy, there's a lot of bad stuff going around. I don't know if you saw that with the artwork stuff in Marathon, but oh boy, that does not.
I missed the artwork story.
They basically stole a bunch of art from an artist, a Scottish artist, a female Scottish artist on Twitter was like, hey, look at all these pieces of art I did in 2017, and they are like one-for-one things just put into Marathon.
Oh, that is awful.
Really bad. Anyway, yeah, probably not. That's probably going to be an interesting launch, I would say. But yeah, you're right.
You're not picking it in your fantasy critic then?
Certainly not.
Okay.
I would not do that. But yeah, I don't know. I hope it's all right. I think they don't have much really. It seems like, so not much announced. So maybe you would expect.
What about this rumored God of War thing?
Remake. Yeah, maybe. Potentially. But anyway, we will be chatting all that stuff that gets announced over the summer from Jeff's show and from the Xbox show and whatever other shows happen to be going on, which I'm sure I'll be spending my entire weekend playing Mario Kart and watching all that stuff, so that'll be a good time.
It's a very good second screen game.
100% it is, yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. Obviously you can find us in various places around the internet. I am at NBZ on Blue Sky. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Lovely. And you can find the show at TNL Podcast as well, where we give you updates about everything that is happening. So yeah, go check that out. You can find us in other places, of course. You can go join our Discord server and chat with some fine folks over there. You can also go to our YouTube channel where we have the podcast hosted if you prefer that instead. You can, of course, go and find us in podcasting app places, but we're on Spotify or on Stitcher. You can download us on any podcasting app that you have, podcatchers they like to call them. Just search for...
I noticed we had a bunch of reviews on Pocket Casts.
Yeah, Pocket Cast takes reviews from other sites, basically.
I mean, yes, I was wondering if it took it from Spotify, but
I think it takes some from there and some from other places. It like aggregates them essentially.
Okay, because we have like 104 ratings on Pocket Cast, which is awesome. So
yes.
Thank you.
So yes, nice aggregation. I think of a few different places, but yes, please do that. Please review us on Spotify. That would be very appreciated. That very much helps in terms of getting the show shared around with people, especially this time before a brand new Nintendo console comes out. And good time for people to jump on board. So. Would appreciate.
Do you remember in 2017 there were a bunch of podcasts that had the name Nintendo Switch in their podcast?
They did,
title?
yeah.
And I don't recognize all those podcasts anymore. I think that we have survived the test of time.
Yeah, this is it. It's evergreen. It's all about the evergreen podcast and all these fucking in the splash in the pan. That's the phrase I'm looking for. These fucking splash in the pan, flash in the pan. Sorry, splash. The splash in the pan is a bad idea because if you've got oil in there, you don't want to put any splashes of water in that pan. Exactly. That's going to go bad for you. Similarly, though, what the fuck does flash in the pan even mean? Like, good
question.
Probably some old English term of some kind. Anyway, that is going to do us. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time, right before the Switch 2 comes out, so we'll have our final...
It comes from the firing mechanism of early flintlock muskets. When the priming powder in the pan, the small cavity where the priming powder was placed, would ignite, but failed to ignite the main charge in the barrel. It produced a flash, but no shot. So this failure.
So it's not about like a cooking pan at all. No, that's not anything to do with it.
It's like referencing a musket, and it's like a false shot. It's like a bad thing, a flash in the pan.
We have educated people
today.
There you go. So I hope you have learned something on this podcast.
I wonder if it was invented in France.
For fuck's sake. And on that bombshell, we'll see you next time. Goodbye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Fountain of Dreams from Kirby Triple Deluxe, copyright HAL and Nintendo 2014.